3, 2, 1, fire.
Hey, welcome to It's Your Call. I am John Milkey. Some call me the Milkman. It's live on blasttheradio.com, on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, etc. And on all those platforms, you can post your comments. We can bring them up on the screen and include them in this conversation. And if you'd like to call the show, well, hey, luckily enough, I'm one of the cool kids. I have a cell phone right here in the studio. Our number is 613-604-6464. Again, 613-604-6464. So welcome to the show. Who's here with us? David is with us. He's present. Tina Marie, hi. And Chrissy, hi. Okay, so everybody joining us. Thank you, by the way. If you ever miss an episode, no worries. Find the podcast. Just go to our webpage. All the links are there. It's yourcall.ca. ITS yourcall.ca. The show is brought to you by the only people I will ever trust to touch any of my vehicles, whether it be my RV, whether it be my milk truck, McCarthy Automotive, 1150 Heron Road, mccarthyautomotive.ca. All right, well, hey, Mark, you wanted the job. How's your day so far? Yeah, I bet. We're going to do a deep dive on that LRT report from yesterday. Let's start with the new mayor. All right. I first came to know of Mark Sutcliffe. He and I are around the same age, and he had this wickedly brilliant business idea to do sports updates on the phone. You would call a number, get a sports update sponsored by blah, 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 blah. That led him to a career in broadcast where I got to work with him off and on. I know him as a very smart broadcaster, radio and TV, a great entrepreneur. The I Run Radio Show, Ottawa Business Journal, and on and on and on. When he left radio of his own accord, which, by the way, doesn't happen very often, usually you're pushed out, he left to launch a podcast. And his podcast is all about leadership. He was on a quest to find great leaders. And he talked to great leaders on every single episode. Naheed Nenshi, former mayor of Calgary. Brilliant, brilliant guy and great leader. Even Jean Chrétien was on his podcast, and on and on and on the list of great guests go. I listened to every episode. A, because I really like Mark, but B, I'm also on a quest to find great leadership. In fact, I was so enamored with it, I reached out to Mark and I offered some technical assistance for his podcast, which he took me up on. So all this to say, look, I don't know Mark well. I consider him a friend, not to the point where we would sit down and do dinner together, but certainly a friend. I know him well enough to know this, that when he sets his mind to do something, he is all in, 100%. So when he announced he was running for mayor, he had my full support. And yes, this is the first time I've ever declared who I have voted for publicly in any election. I voted for Mark Sutcliffe, 100%, because I know what I've got with Mark Sutcliffe. When he announced he was going to be a candidate for mayor, Mark Sutcliffe said, "My city needs me right now." He signed up to deal with this. He knew what was coming. He saw everything that was happening in the city, but most especially with the LRT. And he put his name on the ballot and said, I want to be the one to step up and deal with this. And the people of Ottawa said, all right. So this is his moment. And boy, do we sure need someone. Boy, do we sure need someone. So just to run down quickly, in case you've not seen any of the report, first off, well, in fairness, there's one local news station. It's nowhere to be seen on their webpage. Yesterday's news already, I guess. Other stations, including some, by the way, who are very friendly to former Mayor Watson and some of his little inner circle, they're now reporting the horror that we became aware of yesterday in this report. The city manager, Rideau Transit Group, the consortium that is building this LRT for us, and then Mayor Watson knew full well the LRT wasn't ready. On time, on budget. Remember that? And then there were delays. But they launched it anyway. It wasn't safe. It didn't meet all of the safety protocols. It hadn't been tested long enough. Remember that article? We were supposed to have whatever it was, 20 days of testing, and after 11, they're like, yeah, it's fine. Remember that? They knew, but they launched it anyway. And according to this report, purely because politics. I want to be there to cut the ribbon. The city manager, RTG John Manconi, then head of OC Transpo, and then Mayor Watson, had information that they knowingly withheld from members of city council and from you and I. Is that not what we put councilors on council for? Oh, if you weren't in the inner circle, apparently, you were kept out of the loop. There was an entire WhatsApp messaging group set up for this. Keep others out of the loop. What? It's absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. And now, some of those not in the inner circle are saying, told you so. Namely, Catherine McKenney and Diane Deans. And I've been at odds with Diane Deans on several issues. Occasionally, she steps up. And here she's stepping up. She's calling on Mayor Jim Watson to apologize. Which I mean, apologize. Yeah, that's a good place to start. She's also calling, by the way, on re-elected Councillor Alan Hubley, her successor as transit chair, to resign not just from transit, but his seat on council. Justice William Horrigan, who's the commissioner of the Ottawa LRT Public Inquiry, did not pull any punches. Every media outlet I tuned into yesterday, newspaper, radio, TV, were very specific in their language. They have never, ever seen anything as scathing as this. Some of the terms used in the report: deliberate malfeasance, egregious violations of the public trust, outright misrepresentation, 637 pages in this report. Revelation after revelation after revelation. The book of Revelations does not have this many revelations. It is astounding. Most notable, though, is the conclusion in the report. It was rushed. It was not safe. It was untested. And all of it done purely for political reasons. Self-serving political reasons. Goes on to say the only thing that should have mattered to all parties was you and I, the public. Well, public safety be damned. Gotta get the photo op. Here's a quote from the report. When participants deliberately mislead the public regarding the status of public undertakings, they violate a fundamental obligation that underlies all public endeavors. The public rightly trusts both government and private sector entities to act in a manner that furthers the broader public interest. As a condition of their involvement, participants in a public project undertake to honor that obligation to the public. There are two instances in the LRT project that stand out as egregious violations of the public trust. Also in this report, the conduct of senior city staff and Mayor Watson names Mayor Watson specifically in not sharing information about trial running. The conduct, this report says, prevented councillors from fulfilling their statutory duties to the people of Ottawa. Yes, they work for us. They ask for our tax dollars because they believe this LRT project is important. And we say, okay, take our money. Please do the right thing with it. Moreover, the report says, is the part of a concerning approach by senior city officials to control the narrative of the non-disclosure of vital information or outright misrepresentation. Lying to our faces about a $2.1 billion project that we're paying for. To our faces. Report says it is difficult to imagine the successful completion of any significant project while these attitudes prevail within the municipal government. I mean, I recognize we've got a brand new council now. Some of the councilors currently on the council were reelected, but by and large, it's a brand new council. A lot of new faces and a new mayor. But despite that, when something like this happens and you are lied to, and something like this is rushed. Remember the scenes of people having to walk along the train tracks because the damn thing broke down, climbing out of tunnels? Remember it going off the tracks? I mean, this report says we're lucky no one has been injured. Can you imagine if we had not had to deal with the COVID-19 situation, right? We've taken the public service out of the downtown core. We are not commuting in this city like we did 2-3 years ago. Can you imagine if COVID hadn't happened and everything was as it was, and we had all of our public service, all of the people who work in and out, in and around the downtown, on top of all the university students, on top of everything else, our regular commute piled onto that train, and it was rushed and untested and new technology, and we knew things weren't working? Holy crap. The lawsuits that you and I would be on the hook for as taxpayers. These errors were so massive, Horrigan concludes, that it raises questions about the city's fitness to oversee such a grand infrastructure project in the future. Okay, well, let's deal with that because guess what? We're currently dealing with a grand infrastructure project of that magnitude. It's called Phase 2 of the LRT. If you've driven to the west end of the city or from the west end of the city, you see it. It's right beside the Queensway. Those big buildings being built, the highway being moved over, the bridges, the concrete from Bell's Corners all the way to Canada. That's Phase 2. If you live in the south end of the city, you've seen it as well. From South Keys all the way through, Finley Creek, up past the airport to Barhaven South. Phase 2. If you live in the east end, they've pretty much moved Highway 17 in order to put this new rail bridge up the middle of the damn thing. I mean, we're in the middle of building Phase 2. And this report says it raises questions about the city's fitness to oversee such a grand infrastructure project in the future. So what do you want to do here? What can we do? The city manager, who's named in this report, I guess got wind of what was going to be in the report. Come on, they knew what was going to be in this report. Oh, but the city manager hung on to the last second, suddenly mysteriously resigns on Monday. Really? The former mayor, Jim Watson, I read, conveniently, is away right now. A well-deserved rest. Yeah, I'm not resting too well right now, watching my $2.1 billion go into this. But good, good. And you know what? One-on-one, I've always gotten along with Jim Watson. Don't agree with, some of his politics, some of his decisions. You're never going to agree with somebody 100% of the time. But you know what? Jim Watson was always very nice to me, always had time for me. But on this, Mr. Watson, oh, how convenient. Good for you. Rest up. Rest up, because I got some questions, and I know a good number of other people who would like to ask you some questions as well. We're told he's aware of the report and looks forward to reading the report upon his return. He knows what's in it. So did the city manager, resigned on Monday. Well, Premier Doug Ford, by the way, where is he in all this? Well, he called for this inquiry. Okay. Someone saw something wasn't right and has actually stepped up and said, okay, we got to investigate. So Premier Doug Ford is the one responsible for this inquiry. He says today the project stunk to high heaven and that senior City of Ottawa officials did a terrible job. Gee, where have we heard that? Oh, that's right. That little inquiry thing about this convoy. Ottawa officials did a terrible job. Premier Ford says this: we saw Mayor Watson not being transparent with his councillors. Anybody who was around it at that level saw it. Councillors like Catherine McKenney and Diane Deans called it out. Ford says, we saw the city manager having to step down. It was just in absolute shambles. It stunk to high heaven. So, over to you, Mark Sutcliffe, who stepped up. He said, I want to take this on. My city needs me. Gosh, Mark, I don't know where you get that kind of intestinal fortitude, because what a mess. Okay, but you're ready for it. Here we go, man. Mark Sutcliffe says he will implement the key recommendations in this report. Some of them anyway. There's 103 recommendations. My question here on It's Your Call, we're 15 minutes into the show. What do we do? Do we shut this thing down temporarily? Some are saying rip the whole thing up, be done with it. Look, if we're not going to put our public service back into the downtown core, do we even need it? I think we did pre-pandemic, but now we've discovered we can all work from home. Do we even need this thing anymore? Do we at least halt construction on phase 2, which I recognize money has already been spent. It's already being built. And if we don't continue on with it, we're stuck looking at this unfinished concrete and steel and all this crap in our city. I'd almost rather have to stare at that mess than stare at another unsafe, untested phase 2 LRT that doesn't work, that falls off the tracks. So what do you want to see happen to Jim Watson? Can anything happen to Jim Watson? Some are saying, yeah, he's going to get a Senate seat. What do you want to see happen to Manconi? Former manager Steve Kanellakos. I apologize. I said his name wrong. And do you suspect, as many do, that there's more to this? As in other levels of government? I'm not telling you where to look. I think you can read between the lines here. It has been suggested. What do you want to see happen? What's next? Where do we go from here? It's your call, 613-604-6464. You can post your messages on whatever social media platform you're watching on. You can call the show as well. Let's begin with a text at 613-604-6464. Lay the LRT and make sure it is safe. Oh, sorry. I was so worried that it wasn't safe. It would have been better to delay the LRT and make sure it's safe. I feel the LRT should be shut down and make sure it is safe. My text program is weird. It does everything like 2 sentences at a time, so I apologize for butchering that. Let's go to the top of my heap and your comments. Forgive me when I scroll up. Hey, the show is brought to you by McCarthy Automotive, 1150 Heron Road, mccarthyautomotive.ca. From something as simple as a battery, tire changeovers. They offer tire storage as well. Not too late for winter tires, by the way. You need new winter tires. They carry all major brands. And make sure, please, whenever a wheel is off for service for any reason, after 100 kilometers of driving, get back there. Get your nuts torqued. It's important. And I know it's a funny phrase, but it means that your wheels are actually sitting properly on your car. They're not going to fly off. These are people who care greatly about you, their customer, and they'll take good care of you. And fleet vehicles, you bet they do, fleet vehicles. All right, let's start with Peter. He says, as I said at the time on Lowell's show, it was a crooked deal for Liberal mayors all over Canada. In every LRT, it was delayed over budget, happened in Liberal mayor-ran cities. Interesting. Yep, I remember you saying that too. Tony says, I wonder if these people knew they'd be held financially / criminally accountable for these flagrant misdeeds. Would their behavior change? And that's the thing, right? And we've talked about this as it pertains to the convoy. Okay, so it's deemed, if it's deemed, we have yet to get a ruling on it. If it's deemed that the Emergency Measures Act was in fact, the criteria wasn't met, that was done illegally, who pays the price? Apparently, if you're in government, nobody. But you and I are left holding the bill. Thanks. And a broken down choo-choo train. To Twitch, Chrissy says, cut corners like that, you'll run into trouble. I would rather have safety first than rush to get the LRT going. It was rushed, no doubt. I think, listen, any major project, if you've ever built a home, there's delays. If you've ever bought a car, there's delays. Sometimes buying a thing at the grocery store, rain check, there's delays. Yeah, I get pissed off, get angry about that, sure, whatever else. But wouldn't you rather be angry at the delay than to have a thing that doesn't even sit on the tracks properly and the people actually have to climb off it and walk up the rail tracks in the cold? Gee, come on. David says, isn't that considered criminal? Could that not lead to jail time for those that knew but hid it? I'd like to think so, but I guess not. We have immunity, apparently, if you're an elected official or a highly paid city manager or OC Transpo or head of the Rideau Transit Group, SNC Lavalin. Who are they friends with? Mark is on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, Mark. He says, apologize. Charged and thrown in the slammer. I think is what you mean. All right, Mark, I got you. Joshua says, they were overtime and it was rushed. Sounds competent. Hey, Ken, say what he says. LRT was rushed because of political pressure. Next in the news, the sky is blue and water is wet. Tina Marie, I knew the very first time I rode the LRT that there was something off. I'd love to know what you sensed about that, Tina Marie. And I've heard a lot of people say that same thing. Kathy wants her money back. She says, how about you? Peter says, if something went funny and it's criminal, then the people involved need jail. I mean, I haven't even heard that conversation. Is it even possible? I don't know. If you do know the answer, 613-604-6464. Watson and Friends says, Ann, get to walk away with severances and pensions in hand. Yep, they sure do. Watson's on a beach somewhere. Well-deserved rest. Oh, okay. All right. Meanwhile, the citizens in Ottawa are walking alongside the train tracks, Jim. Tina Marie says, even a few weeks ago while in Toronto, I had to use their subway / trolley system, and it was so much smoother of a ride and a heck of a lot quieter. Yeah, an established system. Why did we have to go? I sound like Seinfeld. Why did we have to go with this untested train? There's no other city in the world that has this LRT system. Why us? I would much rather go with something. You know what? There's a reason Amazon asks you to review the things you buy, because other people want to hear how it works or how it doesn't work before they put their money on the line. This is basic commerce. David says, City of Ottawa is a real mess for sure. 200 hybrid buses that didn't last on the roads for 5 years. Human rights violations as an employer. STO has winter tires that OC Transpo cannot find. On and on and on. I'd be interested to do a deeper dive on that, David. Thank you. Ann says, and you wonder why people are so angry at government. Listen, yeah, no, I know why they're angry at government, and I know why they're becoming more and more disenfranchised with government. Here's a report that has 637 pages basically saying you, the politicians, the elected officials, lied to the taxpayer. You lied to the voter. You withheld information. You put their lives at risk. I get it. I get why you wouldn't want to show up and vote. You're done with it. And that speaks back to the whole conversation about leadership, doesn't it? Where are those people? And why should they step up? Why would they open themselves up to this? I give Mark full credit. That's just, even if he finds some great solution to this, there's going to be people who don't agree with it and who just want to tear him down at every level. That is not a fun job to be in. And it's why when people put their name on the ballot, I envy it. I admire it. I just, and you hope. And that's the thing, right? And maybe I live in a glasses half full kind of world. I always hope when I look at the individual on the ballot and I've investigated the person I'm going to put the X next to, it's a leap of faith. I really hope this person is true to their word and has my best interest at heart, whether I agree with the decision they make or not. At least I want to know I've been heard and that I matter. Tony says the City of Ottawa got exactly what they wanted with Watson. All knew full well that he was a McGuinty Liberal minister, and still they voted him in. Tina Marie says the traffic mess towards Orleans is deadly. All right, David wants phase 1 fixed first. Over to Andre. Then the city plans an event for us to come and see it, and they shut down the LRT so they can make money for people parking downtown for the parade. I mean, the number of times this thing is shut down for maintenance. Like the Santa Claus parade was on last week, Andre. You and I drove past it. Yeah, the LRT wasn't running. If you wanted to go to downtown Ottawa for the Santa parade, sorry, no train. What? This is why Watson and the city manager jumped ship, says Satan's Playmate. You think? I mean, even if that's not the case, and again, I quite like Jim Watson. I've always had a good relationship and a good rapport with him. But I'm sorry. It is awfully tough for me to buy any argument. Nope, it was just time for me to walk away and do something else. Nope, it was just time to retire. Come on. You know I'm not buying that. You knew this report was coming. You knew what it would say. And you will spend the rest of your life and the rest of my life trying to convince me otherwise. You knew. You lied. You withheld information for political gain. And if you end up with that Senate seat that people say you're going to end up with, I'm going to have a hell of a hard time saying, you know what, I've always gotten along with that guy. No, this stinks. No way. Over to Chrissy. Need to bring in experts from other cities and provinces to show how these LRTs should be built. Well, apparently they did. And this is where we're at now, having to pay even more. Well, Rideau Transit Group is on the hook for that. Got to bring in outsiders to ensure it's safe. And by the way, that's also in the report. These outsiders that are there now to ensure that it's safe, yeah, they are to report directly to council. So that means in council chambers, at a public meeting that is broadcast on TV and open to the public. None of these conversations one-on-one. All of it before our eyes. That's a good thing. But is anybody watching? Does anybody care? Over to David. It was a risk to public safety. It derailed at least once with passengers on it. Also remember when the platforms were too small to hold all the passengers. How about the floors being dangerously slippery in the winter? Right? Let's mop the floors with water in an unheated train. station, the heating and cooling issues in the trains, the switches that were freezing that had to install gas heaters, kind of defeats the purpose of going electric. The drinking fountains that froze solid in the winter. I mean, it's like nobody had a clue how cold it got here. Peter says, I talked to some of the workers on the project who worked on it, and they were blown away by the sloppy work and money spent for no-show workers and days when nothing was done. No wonder Watson didn't run again. Usually Watson is living on the public dime as mayor or MPP. Okay, I think, listen, that's established. What do you want to see happen, though? Nobody's answering that question. Where do we go from here? Ironically, we're talking about a train. Where do we go from here? Now that you know what you know, which I think we all kind of knew anyway, it was Ottawa's dirty little secret. What do we do? What do we do with this mess? If you're Mark Sutcliffe, what are you thinking right now? What's our way out of this? All right, Jewel says, I think we need to stop building phase 2 and fix phase 1. Jewel, I agree with you. Put the brakes on phase 2 right now. Drop your shovels, drop your hammers, walk away, shut it down. And I realize there are people whose livelihoods depend on this. Absolutely. But how do you, in good conscience, keep going ahead building something when you haven't even got the first part of it right? It's coming up on Christmas, and I think to when I was building a model railroad, because I got all kinds of model railroad stuff every single Christmas. My dad and I worked on this together. If you couldn't, if you couldn't get it past the first part of the track, wasn't a whole hell of a lot of sense in building the second part of the track. I can't get it to go round and round in a circle yet. But now I'm going to run the train up and down the stairs through the entire house? Come on. I knew that at 5 years old, 6 years old, whatever. This is not rocket science. It's train science, apparently, but let's go to Kathy. She says, now you know why Watson and councillors didn't run in this past election. As long as those who are responsible for the light rail, are not in office, we as taxpayers cannot go after them once they either retire or resign from positions. Let's go to You're 12 years too late. Mark, okay, now we're having conversations with each other. I will move on. Scroll. Phase 2 can be turned into express bus lanes. Yeah, it doesn't seem too complicated. I mean, do you even need to pave it? Of course we will, because, an opportunity to spend more money that we don't need to spend. Throw some damn rocks down and run buses on it. For now. Okay. I hadn't thought of that, but hey, listen, agree or disagree, there's a solution. At least someone has an idea. Thank you for that. Chrissy says, nope, we've come too far to quit now. So you want to keep going? Okay. I don't agree with you, but okay. And stop additional phases, adds Satan's Playmate. It will take a lot to fix phase 1, changing the tracks and getting rid of the current trains. Any bonuses they got while in office should be returned, says Tina Marie. Good luck with that. David is back to say some investigating needs to be done. Have a look into some people's bank accounts and look for some special deposits. That rumor's out there, David. I don't know. I mean, can we even? I don't know. Pierre, I owe you a phone call, by the way, Pierre. I did get your message. Thank you. Finish it, rip out the tracks, and put buses on it so we can reclaim the transit way that was working great. Hard to disagree with you there, sir. Like I said, especially if we're not going to put the public service back downtown, if they're going to continue working from home, which, by the way, is devastating to every business downtown. But if that's what we're going to do, yeah, cut our losses. Cut our losses right here. It will forever be something we laugh about, joke about, and cry about. But why keep building something if it ain't going to be of any use and if it doesn't work? Sean, over to you on Facebook. I want to see a stop to the LRT and also want to see some heads roll. Not like either will happen. Well, how do you make heads roll now? The city manager quit on Monday, Sean. Oh, the report's coming out on Wednesday. Yep, gotta go. I mean, the report's coming, eh? the premier went ahead and did that. Gee, gosh, guess I'm not running in the next election. No, I'm going to be on a beach somewhere too when that comes out. Oh my God. I mean, literally burying his head in the sand. Over to Ann on Facebook. Go over the contracts with a fine-tooth comb and wire SNC Lavalin, Allstream, and all contractors not being held responsible for a faulty system. Andy Hayden had it right, says David. We should have gone with the tunnel with buses. Imagine how much cheaper that would have been. Yeah, until we started buying all electric buses, because that seems smart. Lori Ann, I believe this is the first time you commented on the show. Nice to have you here. I would rather have the delay. Safety matters. I'm with you 100%. And I don't even ride the damn train. Listen, OC Transpo I was a season ticket holder for the Red Blacks. You can take OC Transpo free to and from the games. I won't even do that. I Uber. Like, that's how little I want to do with this system. One of the first comments I had today when I posted this, let me get over to it right now. And look my wife took the bus for years and I would hear horror stories. Now she works fairly close to home. In fact, she could walk there in probably 10, 15 minutes. So she's not on the bus a whole lot. But our niece is. Okay, and our niece has moved here from Oshawa. She's scratching her head constantly going, this system makes no sense. Sure, on the transitway, you've got a bus coming every 10, 15 minutes. But then to get from the transitway to, again, it's about a 10-minute, not even a 10-minute drive, 6 minutes. If I had all red lights between my house and South Keys, it might be 6 minutes. It can be an hour for her to get from there home. Like, the whole thing, it just doesn't make sense at all. And Monica said this earlier when I posted what I was going to be talking about today on the show. Monica says, everything about the transit system makes me feel like the people planning it have never ridden on it. There are 2 express buses which leave Tunnies for Eagleson Park and Ride in the afternoons. They both come every 30 minutes. I want to know who decided that instead of spacing them to come every 15 minutes. Have them both start within 2 minutes of each other. So if you just miss them both, it's a 30-minute wait with no heat for the next one. Ugh, she says. These stories are constant. Nobody's listening to us. To hell with you, minion. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have information. Wink, wink. There you go. SNC at it again, says Peter. Trudeau should freeze those bank accounts. Yeah, well... We had the trolley system many years ago. That's the thing that kills me about this, right? The city has no vision and no plan. We are up and down like a toilet seat at a co-ed beer party. We had trains and trolleys in the downtown core. And at one point, somebody, somewhere on some city council said, the future is not this. We're going to go with buses. And I remember the conversation. Do we go with some sort of train system? And Andy Hayden and Lowell was part of that too, by the way. Nope. Buses. We can't do a subway because we're on a fault line, so that doesn't make sense. Buses are the future for this city. And let's face it, this city, by virtue of it being a government town, we don't have a traffic problem, right? We have a rush hour problem. If, like I said, the public service is actually going in and out of the downtown core. We have a morning rush hour and an afternoon rush hour. And outside of that, ain't nobody on the bus. Let's be honest. And we joke about that. The double-decker buses, the articulated buses driving through subdivisions at 11:30, midnight. Nobody on them. The waste. Back to Joshua. Why the LRT seems an urge to be ahead of the curve. Instead, we are behind. We're the laughing stock. We're the laughing stock. And by the way, even if you're not in Ottawa, this affects you. Because you're paying for it as well. Federal tax dollars are very much a part of this. As are provincial, but it especially hits us here in Ottawa because we pay all 3. If there's a chance of criminal charges, says Satan's playmate, Watson will extend his vacation and never return. I don't know. Tony says, clearly Ottawa's main problem is that it was just too left-leaning. Voting in woke ideologues has landed you where you now find yourselves in this city. You know, the Nick and Joe show airs here on BTR Wednesday nights, and they had an interesting point last night. Joseph did, and he ran in the last election, by the way. And that is, and I'm paraphrasing here, but people need to stop voting blue or red or orange, and they need to start voting for individuals. And when we get back to focusing on the individuals and engaging with the individuals who are running in our ridings and find out who they are and what they stand for and what they're willing to represent on our behalf, if we start voting that way, almost treat them like independents, and that's kind of how the system was designed in the first place. The parties are there for a reason, obviously, but people just, you know what? I don't even know anything about the candidate I'm voting for, but I'm voting for this party. I agree. I think we need to look at the individual. And yes, I know. If you got to toe the corporate line, you got to toe the party line. This is how we're voting. But at least I have some confidence that my voice is being heard and it's being debated. And listen, my constituents they've been very clear on this. We can't vote this way, or we have to vote this way, etc. We got to get back at looking at the individuals. I really liked that comment last night on the Nick and Joe show. Ann says, I love how the rats ran from the sinking ship, not wanting to face the music. Such slime balls. I have even more disrespect for Watson, Manconi, and the city manager. Slime bags, all of them, and getting lucrative pensions and severance pay on our dime. Pierre is back to say, way back, Alan Mercier had interest in Alstrom. That's probably why we got a shitty train. All right. Oh, Lord, says Chrissy, it's hard to be humble. Get your nuts torqued at McCarthy Automotive. Thank you very much. We have Ken has joined. Ken, good for you. Welcome to the show again.
Thanks, man.
I didn't even mention that the video camera was an option today, and it's funny because, like, with the clock ticking down, like 10 seconds, 9, 8, 7, I'm like, oh, I didn't do the camera update, and I ran over to the website real quick. So you knew to go to it. Anyway, what a mess we're in, Ken. Can we at least start
100%,
on that?
yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been discussing this with friends over the last number of years, and light rail was never at the top of my priority when it came to OC Transpo.
Right.
But people, Ottawa needs light rail and needs it yesterday. Like, okay, well, fine. So I think what we need to do going forward, first of all, I think we're too late. We're in too deep. We just can't stop construction now. I think
okay,
it's
you and I are
too
going to
late.
disagree on that. I think I'm not saying end it and never build it again, but at least suspend it.
Well, I suppose you could suspend it for a little bit. I think what needs to be done, though, is that they need to have regular inspectors or auditors or somebody like that that goes out to these construction sites on an ongoing basis, not just waiting for the actual consortium to come back and report to council or to the mayor or whoever they report to. So I'm hoping that this new group that's part of the suggestions will actually take that on. Is every second Monday they go out to a site and say, okay, today you're going to build this much in rail, and and you're going to build a new station, and we're going to come back in 2 weeks to see how far along you are. Can we get a cost update? Can we get everything else?
Yeah, what
And
you're
they're
describing is not unlike. I mean, I don't know where you worked in high school. I worked at McDonald's, and they would always talk about these mystery shoppers that would come in, etc. And it was just people who looked like everyday customers. You wouldn't know who they are. In fact, they were everyday customers. They just picked up a job to walk into a certain McDonald's at a certain time, order a certain thing, and report back on it.
That's right.
Is that kind of what you're describing? Is like the mystery
Maybe
LRT customer?
Yeah, in terms of the actual LRT taking the transportation, sure, you could have somebody doing that. I'm talking about in terms of the actual construction process
Right.
here,
Yeah,
as
no.
right now
I'm
for
with you.
stage two and everything else. So yeah, you could do that. Somebody goes out, reports regularly, and says, this is what they said they were going to do. This is what they actually managed to complete. It's just like you mentioned it before, when you're building a house, it's a general contractor. By stage one, we're
Or a
going to
home
have
inspector.
right. We're going to have the foundation poured by this date, and we're going to have the walls up by this date and this date and this date, and they would have regular reporting
But
faithfully.
shouldn't we already have that in place? It seems to me we should.
We should.
Because
Clearly, we didn't.
I mean, for all intents and purposes, the LRT, okay, it's our house that we're building. Okay. We are the people moving into it. And we should expect that the developer, that being the city, reports back to us on where things are at.
Yeah.
Should I go buy my fridge yet or not?
Well, and that's the thing. Clearly, we didn't, because if we did, we would have known about all of the issues along the way. Somebody might have picked up on the fact that the trains didn't have heating systems for the wheels. Like you'd think, okay, metal on metal in
It didn't
winter.
have heating systems for the
Like,
patrons in Ottawa, where we have a canal
yeah,
that we skate on in the winter and invite people from all over the world. We're so cold. Come here and do this thing. Heat on our trains? No. I say nay. What was your first reaction when you saw the report yesterday?
well, it was like what I said in the chat. Oh, gee, political pressure. Oh, gee, the sky is blue and water's wet. Like,
So you
big
knew.
surprise there.
You knew.
Well, I don't think we can ever say we knew for sure. As an observer, obviously the inquiry knows for sure. The biggest question that I have is that if people like Jim Watson and Steve Kanellakis lied while on the stand during the inquiry, is there a legal ramification for doing that?
I
I
would
know when
think
you
it was
lie
the
on
same
the
as
stand
perjuring yourself in court. Yeah.
yeah, if you perjure yourself in court, guess what? You could be going to jail. So I don't know if in an inquiry you could do the same thing.
I don't know.
And I suppose right now that would be the only legal thing. It's not like we could say, "Hey, let's fire Kanellakis and have an election and get rid of Jim Watson." That's we can't do that now. So
Do you think we could at least maybe make some calls to whatever resort he's staying at and at least cut off his free supply of all-inclusive booze or what?
change his flight home to somebody on Air Canada and have him delayed, landing in
No,
Pearson or something like that.
make him have to land in Ottawa and take the LRT back from the airport.
Yeah.
Anyway, Ken, always appreciate our conversation. It's good to see you. You're
All right.
well?
Thanks. Yeah, everything's good here.
Good. All right. I'll
All
let
right.
you go. Appreciate your
Thanks, Sean.
chiming in, and thanks for the initiative, too, to go to the website and fire out the webcam. It's just that easy, folks. And if you don't want to appear on cam, that's okay. I get it. You can also just have the microphone aspect on, but it's exactly like oh, look, we're getting spam. Free vert girls chat here. That's awesome. And block user. Bye-bye. Got that last night too. I look at that as we are actually on the road to success. If we're getting spammed, then we're obviously on the road to success. All right, let's go to Linda. Get a hold of Jim Watson's emails, and I can guarantee you that there's some poop going on in there. He clearly turned a blind eye on a lot of stuff. Hey, Linda, a lot of that is on WhatsApp. Can you believe city officials are, like the Cool Kids Club have got their own little WhatsApp group? Holy crap. That's grade 10. Yeah, don't tell Diane. Don't tell Catherine. This is our little secret. Okay. See you at the party. Don't tell anybody there's a party. Oh my gosh. Ann says, I would bet there are some city staff whose heads should be rolling over this fiasco. And yet, no heads will roll. Jeff, stop work on phase 2 and correct the mess with phase 1. Thank you, Jeff, for at least giving me an answer to my question. What do you want to see happen going forward? He says, stop work on phase 2, correct the mess with phase 1. And I'm assuming, Jeff, that once that is done and running as it should, you would be okay then with continuing on with phase 2. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I know we're in overtime here. The show is typically a half hour, but it doesn't have to be. As long as I'm getting reaction, I will stick around. I'm pretty much living in the studio morning, noon, and night anyway, so it's another couple minutes. Back to Pierre. If somebody from outside came and inspected the LRT, it would probably be condemned. That's an interesting idea, and it kind of speaks to what Ken was talking about, too. Some impartial person overseeing it and reporting back, which I can't believe we don't have. Joshua says it's time to reevaluate the situation. The world is entirely different now than it was when the project started. What are our needs now? This is what needs to be figured out. Well, that's my point with, stopping, phase 2. Do we even need that? I mean, did we need it in the first place? I don't know. I had questions about it then. If the question needs to be asked of the federal government before we continue this thing on, what's the plan here? Are you going to be putting the public service back into the buildings downtown? And by the way, if they're not, as if Mark Sutcliffe and council don't already have enough that landed on their desk yesterday. I mean, that question is there. What does our city look like in the days to come? If the public service is going to be permitted to work from home, then we don't need this thing. I don't think. Downtown's pretty damn quiet these days. Go from here, says Peter. Too much money has been spent. It needs to be looked at and fixed so it works. No doubt the companies involved have insurance on the project that needs to be used to get it running smoothly. Ford needs to oversee it along with the Ministry of Transportation. Okay, so you're trusting Ford, obviously, who did call the inquiry, and says, I could not disrespect Watson, Manconi, nor the city manager more, leaving the scene of the crime and collecting lucrative pensions. I believe we did read that already. Let me skip ahead here to Peter. They have BART system in San Fran, California, and they have a massive fault line. But does the BART go underground? I don't know. I was big on the monorail, and not just because of The Simpsons, by the way. Mark says, as citizens, we have to be able to fire them. Well, how do you fire someone who up and quits or doesn't run for election again? And again, the whole thing, as if it didn't stink enough. The stinkers who caused the stink are sitting on a beach somewhere. They knew. And they got the hell out of the way before the bomb dropped. It's sickening. When I worked on Heron, says Satan's Playmate, I had those milk run bus. Took an hour, but only one bus if the wanted a quicker ride. It was an express bus to Baseline and then 118. They built Fallowfield and the milk run bus stopped, and it was now 3 buses and an additional 20 minutes. I know. It's got to run on, to me, it's got to run on some kind of grid. Like if you're going to run the train. And look, it's tough to put a grid in place in a city that's already established like we are. But we have a very definitive, geographically, we have a very definitive north point to our city. It's the Ottawa River. Gatineau's on the other side. And by the way, shouldn't we be working very closely with Gatineau and just unofficially be one city and build a regional transit system that serves both sides of the river? That's a whole other conversation. But we have a very definitive point north. Okay, so if we're going to run LRT, the Queensway runs east-west. And I know people in Ottawa struggle with directions. That's why you live in the East End, you live in the West End, okay? So if you live in the West End and you're driving towards where you live, you're westbound. I get into these conversations all the time. Yeah, I want to report an accident on the Queensway. Okay, what direction? Heading towards Canada. Okay, so westbound, I guess. But there's only so far you can go north. Okay, so we've established then we're going to do this line as we're building now, east-west in the city. Great. Let's run another train east-west. Maybe Baseline Road Hunt Club kind of thing. And then the future, let's run one east-west south of the city. But no, we're running the damn train like we run our buses, all willy-nilly, squiggly-diggly, up and down this little alleyway and twists and turns and up ramps and down hills and blah, 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 blah. If it's a grid, we run trains, let's say east-west, then you're just servicing buses north-south between train stops. I'm sorry. Did I just say something that is actually logical and might make sense? Yeah, right. This is why I'm not on council. This is why I'm an idea person. Hey, city council, I'm available, to consult with you anytime. I've seen what you pay consultants. I'm more than happy to do that. Yep. Trains east-west, buses north-south. You're welcome. Mark says, when politicians are held accountable, it will force them to be honest. Yeah, well, honest politicians. Mark, dare to dream. Chris, what needs to be asked is what is the expected return on investment from all phases, not just ridership, impact to roads, emissions, etc. We do still have significant traffic during rush hours, but I need to see what is the plus to completing this. If it's not a win, cut bait. Why do we have all that traffic, Chris? They're not coming from work. I mean, some are. The other thing that I should point out is, yeah, interesting, isn't it? Ain't nobody riding this thing. Would you? Hell no. There's been absolutely no incentive. Oh, a free weekend to get people riding the train. It's going to cost more. Yeah, ridership is down. We need to charge the people who ride the train and ride the buses more to offset those costs. That whole smarmy gang have made chumps out of all us taxpayers, and more of us should be angry because most of them are liberals. The media will not go on and on about this prediction. And you know what's interesting, though? First off, the report says exactly what you said. The mayor, the city manager, the head of OC Transpo, and RTG, they made chumps out of all of us. They lied. They know they lied. They rushed us. They put us at risk. And they didn't care. What's interesting, though, your comment about the media, Graham Richardson, okay, who I've seen him with Mayor Watson. He lights up like a Christmas tree when Watson's been on, right? You know, and I think we can agree most of the media, CTV, very friendly to the liberals. Not on this. Graham Richardson was some angry yesterday on his Twitter. Certainly on the reports I saw on TV, he ain't happy at all. and says I'm hired to be a consultant for the city. That was the original plan 20 years ago. Original plan was to twin the tracks from Rockland to Canada. I mean, it makes sense, which is probably why we're not doing it. Yeah, there's Pierre. If it makes sense, the city will ignore it. Over to John. I believe this is, you're a first-time commenter, John. I think, either way, thank you for commenting. I heard the city ordered 100 electric buses without giving a test run of a few or for a few years. John, you're right. I don't know if it's 100. I've lost track of what the number is because we bought this many. No, we're cutting back. What I do know, I believe it's Regina. They looked into the all-electric buses, and they said, okay, let's lease one. Lease one? What? I know. Let's lease one for a year. Let's see how it does in the spring. Let's see how it does in the summer. Let's see how it does in the fall. Let's see how it does in the winter. And then we'll make a decision. We'll lease one for a year. Not Ottawa. I believe the number was 48, John, not 100. But okay. Either way, let's go out and buy all the electric buses, untested. Whee! Oh, I mean, look how well it's worked out with the articulated buses in snow, going up a slight incline. You're absolutely, I mean, I get your point, and you're absolutely right. I agree with you. Like, it's all or nothing with councils past, and I can't lay any blame right now. None of us can with the current council. They are not to blame. It's up to them, as far as I can tell. At this point, like I started the show by saying, Mark Sutcliffe signed up for this. He said, I see it. The city needs me. And he said yesterday he's going to deal with it. Okay, this is his moment. It is that council's moment. I would love to see, and if we have to pay a penalty, and of course we'll have to pay a penalty, get us out of that. Lease one for a year or two and see how it goes. Lease two. Fine. I'm on board with that. My staff wasn't riding it when we were in office. They were late way too often due to LRT issues. They opted to drive instead. Yeah, see, I think you're not getting people back on there. You're just not. David says, who could proceed with a lawsuit against Watson and his shady crew? Would it be the new mayor or the city council or the people of Ottawa? Don't know. Those questions are for someone way above my pay grade, David. Trust me when I tell you that. I don't know the answer to that question. I would like to think that there is some sort of mechanism in place, but all of these conversations we have as it pertains to the convoy, as it pertains to this mess, it would appear that there are no penalties for those who we elect to make these decisions for us, other than public humiliation, other than, being embarrassed in the media and on, shows like mine. I mean, which leaves the only real resolution to this. We need to be more involved as citizens. We need to be more engaged. We need to be keeping a closer eye. We need to demand more of these people who are spending $2.1 billion that you and I go to work every single day to fork over to them. That is your money. You're writing a check for $2.1 billion and then not following up on how it's being used. Come on. If you wrote a check for $25 for some event, you'd be following up to see how your $25 was spent. All right. I got to wrap it up here. I'm getting heated. I appreciate this show. I'm looking at the podcast numbers. I'm looking at the number of people who join the show every single day. It's encouraging. And as long as you're here, I'm going to give you everything I've got to keep coming on and doing some sort of a show. The calls certainly help. So, Ken, thank you for that. Last word goes to our friend Kathy in Calgary. She says, I wouldn't say Ottawa is a laughingstock. Calgary has its own transit issues and insanity, but there's a general larger issue about transit in not just Canada, but North America. Our cities are being planned backwards. They're being designed for cars, and we're forcing transit into those designs as an afterthought. We need to look to European cities and see how they do it. Transit hubs, first with housing and road development around them, and then transit can work. And so happy to see your smiling eyes live on the air. Calgary Kathy, always with very, very sweet words. That will be the last word on the show today. Thank you so very much. Tell your friends about the show. Share the podcast. All of your links are at itsyourcall.ca, and we will be back tomorrow.